there will be 7 that will open in February. There are a further number that have been asked to hold off for the following year, some more that are in continued negotiations, but I just want to be a bit cautious about prejudicing the negotiations that Jane still has going on. What is important is that I think for anyone who says that charter schools are not needed, we got 78 detailed applications made by people, and not all of them can be accepted. That's just the reality. We don't have the money to start up that many schools that quickly, but those 15 will make a big difference. And in addition, there are some that are actually existing state schools that want to convert. That has a lower financial impact because it's effectively just changing from one model one day to the next. There's some administration cost around that, but it's less. But nonetheless, there are constraints around what we can afford to do, even though I suspect that there would have been some of those applicants could have made very good schools. Justine and Jane have had to make tough choices, and I just back them 100% given the combined educational experience that they and the authorisation board have.
So there'll be 8 new charter schools by the start of the next term?
6 more in addition to this one, so that makes 7. Yeah, so it's lucky you should go to mastery school too.
And in terms of 35 state schools, you suggested within 2 years. When are we going to start seeing some of those state schools switch across?
I think you may see 1 or 2 next year, but the process for doing that involves taking an existing school community with you, and understandably that takes some more time. I think a big focus next year will be engaging with school communities who may have expressed interest and saying, well, what's it like to take the journey and say to a group of people, look, here's the school as it's currently functioning. We think that conversion would either give the existing operators more flexibility to operate their way, or it may be that there's a school where they say, look, we're not really happy with the way our school's functioning. We think if these sponsors were to take over the operation of it, there could be some real wins for the win-wins for the existing staff, for the community, and so on. So the conversion process, I think, is more a next year thing at this point. But the new schools, as you can see, are raring to go.
And will the oversight be the same as state schools?
No, the oversight's quite a lot more stringent than state schools. So each of these schools has signed a contract that basically says you have to get a rate of student achievement and a rate of student attendance. You've got to show financial probity, and if you don't meet those targets, then your contract can actually be cancelled. We set all sorts of targets for state schools, but ultimately, if there's a state school that's not meeting any targets, there's not really a consequence for that. In this case, we're actually contracting for outcomes, so quite a lot more stringent in terms of what they have to achieve. However, in return for that, we give them a lot more flexibility. So rather than the Ministry of Education saying, well, we'll pay your teaching staff directly, then we'll give you a bit of money for this purpose and a bit of money for that purpose, and then an operations grant that's a bit more flexible, and you have to have your board and your governance set up this way. The message for charter schools and the likes of Mastery is if you can show you get the results, student safety is number 1, student attendance and student achievement are close behind, then we give you flexibility about how you use the cash that we would have given to a state school on your students' behalf.
What's stopping a state school from doing what Mastery is with 2 hours of math, 2 hours of English in the morning, and then following the New Zealand curriculum?
In principle, a state school could do what Mastery are doing. However, you don't see a lot. You see some wonderful people in the state system doing innovative things, but it's clear from the results we're getting that there's not enough. And what I see charter schools as is a way to break down some of those walls and barriers between the wider society, between universities, charities, businesses and educators, and say, well, look, we all own this problem. If we're going to get together and solve it, what's the vehicle to do that? And charter schools say, look, you can do it any way you want, as long as you get the results for the students. All right.
Just another matter, Minister.
Yeah, I'm happy to, if people want to move on to other matters, I can. Otherwise, I'll just...
Couple more questions on
sure.
schools.
Yeah.
You said 2 weeks ago that 15 charter schools will be opening in 2025. Is that no longer the case?
If I said that, I was wrong. That's never been the case. There's always been some that were going to open in February 2025, and others of that 15, depending on negotiations, that would open either during that year, but more likely in 2026.
What is the target for attendance at this charter school?
85% and above.
Minister, would you say charter schools is an example of you having the most influence in this government?
Well, I think it's an example of how actors brought ideas to the table that have risen to the top and the government is implementing. But I don't want you to misquote me. I've never said that I have the most influence. I've said that ACT punches above its weight, and many of the ideas that ACT have brought to the table have become the government policy.
And then a couple of questions from the gallery. Willie Jackson has announced he will debate you on the Principles Bill. Is this something you're aware of, and would you be open to taking part in that debate?
Yeah, I have, but you got to remember the guy said I was a liar and then refused to apologise. Now I want a higher, more civilised level of debate. It's pretty difficult to have a positive discussion when you've actively said that the other person is lying and you don't believe what they say. I see a debate as an exchange of ideas, and it has to start from a place of mutual respect and dignity for each debater. So if he's prepared to walk that back, then yeah, I think it could be a lot of fun to debate Willie. It always has been. I also make the point that New Zealand actually has a debating chamber. It's quite famous and well known. A lot of people go and debate there, but so far, I've been in government for a year and he's only ever asked me a question once.
Winston Peters says the Prime Minister is struggling because he's new to politics. Do you agree with that?
I agree with half of it. He is new to politics. He's done an extraordinary job being elected in 2020, becoming Prime Minister only 3 years later, and now taking on what is a major challenge for all three parties in the government. This OCR cut is fabulous news for households and businesses and farmers, but that's what we've been dealing with, is high inflation and high interest rates. So I agree that he's new to politics. I don't agree that he's struggling, because if he's struggling, we're all struggling, and actually I think the government is doing a pretty good job, including Winston, against pretty tough conditions.
So would you say national tax cuts have led to economic growth?
Oh, almost undoubtedly, because they've taken money out of the public sector and put them into the private sector. But I just want to pull you up there. They're not national tax cuts. We all signed up as a government, as a coalition government, to this policy, and I stand by it just as strongly as Winston or Chris do, because that's what we're doing for New Zealand. Now, if you take money out of the public sector and leave it in the pockets of the people that earned it, I guarantee you they will spend it more wisely, and when you spend money more wisely, you save money.
Final question from me. Who do you think the public thinks has control of the direction of this government?
I think that they see a partnership of three leaders that works very well together. I know our political opponents tried to say it would all be terrible and we couldn't cooperate. Well, baby, we're cooperating better than your worst nightmare, getting so much done for the future of this country.
Just on another matter, how seriously is the government taking remarks from the Chinese ambassador around joining Pillar 2 of AUKUS and the relationship with China around trade?
We value our relationship with China, but I think New Zealand is also very clear. Our government's elected by New Zealanders to look after New Zealand's interests, and we will do what is in the best interest of New Zealanders. We listen to a whole lot of people around the world. We listen and we learn. That's an important way to be. But ultimately, I would put the question to our Foreign Minister. I think he's been pretty clear in his speeches, including the one he gave in Paris overnight, that New Zealand is here as a country that is independent in its foreign policy.
Should we be concerned, considering it's our biggest trading partner?
Well, let's just be clear. We haven't actually signed up to AUKUS, and it's not entirely clear what Pillar 2 would mean for New Zealand. So I think you also got to bear in mind it's a bit hypothetical. Yes, we should be cautious about our relationship. It's an important relationship. We value our relationship with China and with the Chinese government. However, it doesn't mean that they can tell us what our arrangements should be with other partners. I always say, if one friend tells you you can't be friends with your other friend, then that's not good friendship.
Does the ACT Party have a view generally on AUKUS and joining Pillar 2?
Well, no, I'd leave that to our Foreign Affairs and Defence Ministers. It's their responsibility. They're up with that day to day and have the expertise on it. If you want an ACT Party view, I think we've been very lucky for the last 30 or 40 years that we've not had to invest in a large amount of defence. If you look at what our neighbour is doing, they're going to 2.4% of GDP, we're at 0.9. I think at some point we're going to have to do a lot more, and that point should be sooner rather than later. I also think that the outcome of the American elections means that we may be pressured to do more work on our own defence, and if that eventuates, then we're going to have to move quickly. All right. Oh, sorry. Yes.
What do you make of Health New Zealand cutting a further 1,500 jobs?
Well, I think for those individual people, it's very sad, especially going into Christmas. I also think it has to be put in the context that when people say it's shameful, what was really shameful is that over 5 years, the core civil service grew by 15,000 people, and we didn't get better results. We didn't get faster doctor's appointments. We didn't get more medicines, and we didn't get better outcomes across the public service generally, including in education. So, what the government now faces is a challenge of how do we deliver more for the people that are paying the taxes and need the services, the patients and the students, people that want to drive on better infrastructure, and how do we do that with a limited budget. So we started off with a government that was doing less and less with more and more money. We now must do more and more with less money, and that obviously is very sad for people if they lose their jobs as a result of that. But the alternative would be to carry on a pathway that is unsustainable and will ultimately bankrupt the whole country.
How many more public service cuts would you like to see?
Well, I would like to see none. I would like to be in a country where everything is tickety-boo and we just carry on as we are. The reality is that we had a government that increased spending per person by 30% above inflation and population growth, 30% more real spending per person, and people didn't get better health and education or roads as a result of that. In fact, in many cases, the statistics got worse. Therefore, we have to keep being relentlessly focused on controlling our spending and getting better results, just like every farm, every firm, and every family's had to do through this long winter of a cost of living crisis in the last few years. All right. Okay, folks, well, look, thank you very much for coming along. We really appreciate you paying attention. I think that this will be, look back on, it's a very important day for New Zealand, and I'm just so grateful to all of these fine people, also to Jane and Justine and everyone at the Charter School Agency. You wouldn't believe how hard they've worked to put all of this together. It makes me really proud to be in this government and to have